Amen. So good morning, everybody. We are just 5 minutes late, and we are very pleased to welcome Ben-Akiva, or better known as Moshe Ben-Akiva, who is a Turner professor at MIT. And as we all know, we cannot speak because they are very noisy student in the first row. Very noisy student. Okay, so he's one of the founder of discrete choice model, and we can say that the way discrete choice model exists these days is really due to the very tough work of Moshe during decades, because before they were a little bit nowhere, unknown, used by people in psychophysics and maybe one guy in Chicago, Warner, who did one logic model, but nobody knew them, and no economists knew them either. So, time. Okay, yeah, I am done. So, beside to be pioneer in travel choice behavior, he's also member of the U.S. Academy of Science and Engineering. Okay, science, and he received numerous awards. He was honoris professor in several universities in Europe. And we are very pleased to hear his new theory so we have to understand what is actionable, what is actionable heterogeneity, and why it is related to decarbonization, and why behavior matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. And it's a pleasure to talk to you about this subject. And my subject today is personalization. It's not on the title, but the effect of having actionable heterogeneity is to implement personalization policies. So it's about policies that are designed to be individualized, customized. So that's what this talk is about. And so there is a lot of activities in marketing, in personalization, and the main push for my lab work on personalization was a project on incentives, sustainability incentives. So the US Department of Energy was interested in saving energy in transportation, in mobility. And at that time, about 10, 15 years ago, smartphone penetration has achieved a level that led a lot of startup companies propose to offer people sustainability incentive to change their travel behavior to be more sustainable, more transit, more walking, shorter trips, driving more eco-friendly, etc. And so the idea was that if you can have people download an app, they can register, you can observe their behavior, and then provide them incentive to behave better in some way. But very soon, the reputation of this incentive became that they're not effective. It doesn't change anything. And so the conclusion that we reached was that when you have a small budget and the incentives are kind of uniform, they're small and insignificant. And so there was no effect for spending the budget. And so a lot of public authorities that initially subscribed to the idea kind of canceled them. And so the Department of Energy has a research arm. They thought that by using modern data analytics, modeling, we can do target incentives. And this was what this project that was we were funding to do. And that led to maybe some other applications. So that's the more recent motivation that led my lab to be very active in this area. So I'm going to talk about, first I will define more precisely what we mean by personalization, by behavioral models, which is in my title, and as Andres said, actionable heterogeneity. And the heterogeneity that we are talking about here is obviously consumer heterogeneity. And then I will show you, according to the time that I'll have available, 4 case studies that show how actionable heterogeneity can be used to offer discount, to promote sustainable behavior, incentives, promote equity, and have more customized public transportation. And then I will conclude. So first, personalization. Personalization, as I said, became very popular because of technological advances, primarily the penetration of smartphone. And so there are a lot of personalization opportunities in pricing, regulating, and promoting mobility options. And the intervention, to make an intervention personalized, clearly depends on understanding heterogeneity. People react differently to these kind of action interventions. And so an understanding of preference heterogeneity, how individuals respond differently, can lead to a customization. And so this knowledge of heterogeneity is what I will refer to in this talk as behavioral models. So I don't have a specific, it doesn't have to be discrete choice model, it can be any model that capture the heterogeneity. So that's what I mean by behavioral models in this talk. And there are basically 2 kinds of heterogeneity that can be captured by behavioral model. I refer to it here as systematic heterogeneity that can be represented by covariates like location, OD, maybe occupation, maybe car ownership, etc., and random heterogeneity. So random heterogeneity is heterogeneity, a different response by different people because of their history, because of their experiences, things that we cannot represent by the kind of variable that I mentioned before. So that's called random heterogeneity. And often random heterogeneity can be inferred from past behavior and things that we call latent variables. These are psychological constructs that are not directly observable. And by representing both kinds of heterogeneity, one can then infer individual specific preferences. So that's the idea. The idea is that for each person, we have different estimates. Like if you think about like a mode choice model, we have an individual specific mode choice model. And that's what allows us to have effective personalization. So in the past, before we were working on personalization, capturing heterogeneity was critical for prediction. So if you want to predict well, especially if you want to predict substitution, capturing heterogeneity is critical. So therefore, modern behavioral model don't have like just one value of time or a few values of time, but every individual has a different values of time. And also the same individual doesn't always have the same value of time. So we refer to this as inter-consumer heterogeneity and intra-consumer heterogeneity. Anyhow, capturing this kind of heterogeneity allows us to personalize our predictions of preferences and therefore policy. So what is actionable heterogeneity? Actionable heterogeneity is the part of heterogeneity that will enable personalization. So heterogeneity becomes actionable when differences in response across individuals create a gain from personalization or targeting relative to one size fits all. So the idea is that by doing personalization, applying or benefiting from actionable heterogeneity is what makes personalization attractive. So that's what I'm going to, the bulk of my presentation will be 4 case studies in which we applied personalization. But before I get into this case study, I wanted again to repeat what I said earlier about the difference between prediction and personalization. So prediction is critical at a system level. So when we are interested in evaluating different scenarios, different policies, we are interested in prediction. When we want to test some decarbonization policy, we are focusing on people switching or modifying their behavior, and that's where capturing heterogeneity is critical. So this diagram shows this idea of a system-level analysis where we use behavioral models in which the focus is on prediction, and then an individual level algorithms that in which we are focusing on producing a personalized treatment, a personalized policy, personalization. So this is the system level where we focus on prediction, and if we are optimizing, it's a system optimization. And the user level, whichever way we communicate with the user in this diagram, we assume that there is some computer screen or telephone screen in which we can communicate to a user, but the focus is on personalization, and optimization is optimization for that individual. Now, not every knowledge of heterogeneity is can be potentially applied to gain an advantage, a policy advantage. And I'm focusing on this slide on, of course, ethics and legality. There are some variables which are prohibited. You cannot discriminate by race or gender sometimes. Fairness is a key concept, because the idea of personalization is that people are getting different benefits. In our case, it will always be some benefits. All the case study is you are giving people some benefit or incentive or a discount or information that will benefit them potentially. And so the question is, are we doing it in a fair way because it's unequal? And so there are basically 2 kinds of fairness constraints that govern our work. One is procedural fairness, and procedural fairness means that for different individual in the same situation, in the same place, in the same point in time, we are using the same algorithm. So they are subject, the same, the procedure is the same, the algorithm is the same, the outcome may be different. And the second one is substantive fairness, and well, the objective is to achieve Pareto improvement, meaning we want to do it such that at least one person, at least somebody benefits from it, but nobody is worse off because of the implementation of the personalization. So to conclude this definitional part of my talk, the heterogeneity, intra and inter-consumer heterogeneity is the overall part of modeling, of behavioral modeling, that is critical. Some of it, a subset, this is like a Venn diagram, some of it is actionable, meaning if we are using, we are legally permitted to use it, and we are applying it in a fair way, and it gets us an advantage given our objective, say saving energy, for example. It works to the advantage of we can use our resources more effectively. That's a subset of heterogeneity called actionable heterogeneity, and this is then lead to an application, the personalization. And so before I go into the case studies, I want to show you like an analytical framework that govern all these case studies. So the idea is that we begin with some data. So we have data about the consumer, the traveler, whoever is the subject of the personalization. And then we have a behavioral model that that predict for us how some behavioral parameters, denoted here as theta, relate to these, to what we know about an individual. So the idea is that the individual, when they are present themselves for possible treatment, we have some knowledge about them represented by X, and then given our knowledge of behavior, we have some behavioral parameter. So the example here for X could be things like residential density, car ownership, the origin to destination, and then the behavioral parameter could be a choice model, could be price elasticity, could be, any kind of willingness to pay or value of time and so on. And it's individualized. And then given these behavioral parameters, or what we call actionable heterogeneity derived from behavioral models, we then apply policy. And the policy is a mapping from these, what we know about the respondent, the subject, to an action. An action, for example, could be a discount of transit. Like if we want to promote public transportation, we want to save energy, then the discount could be a discount of the transit fare, and the outcome that of interest Y is, say, energy or transit ridership. And so this is a user choice at the end. So the policy, therefore, is a mapping from these behavioral parameters to an action, A, and the question is, what can we do? What are the optimal policy? Which variables we can act on, and how to act on it? And that's the design of the policy or the personalization. So the example that I show here is where, suppose that we want to save energy, and we have the person right now, based on what we know about them, they are planning to make a trip. We can estimate how much energy they are going to consume. But then we say, okay, what are the alternatives? They have a variety of alternatives, and primarily transit. So if they use transit, we can calculate, using our behavioral model, how much energy will be saved. That's the difference here between Y and Y tilde. Y tilde is what we expect them, that they will, based on what we know about their behavior, what we expect them to consume in terms of energy, and Y tilde will be what they will consume if they use public transportation. And then we look at the difference and multiply it by a value R, which is what we are willing to pay for a unit of energy saving, what's optimal in terms of using our budget. So determination of this R is not trivial, but once we know a value, we can calculate an incentive, and this incentive can be in the form of actually monetary payment, or could be in the form of a discount. Now, one of the reasons that often incentive programs fail, or any kind of personalization may fail, is these are personalization systems that offer a reward to the users. And so if the user know that their behavior is observed, and then the reward will be depending on changes in their behavior, then they are motivated to behave badly during this observation period. This is referred to as strategic behavior. And so the way I just presented it to you, the way we calculated the reward or the incentive was based on a calculation of a model, not on actual behavior. So the question is, how do you, you don't want people to know that you are observing their behavior in order to decide on what the reward is going to be, to avoid strategic behavior. And this was a subject of a presentation yesterday by Alyssa Meyer. She's right there. And it says, if people know that they are being observed and their behavior will affect what the reward it will be later, there is a danger that people can game the system. So we are avoiding this, as I said here, by using the modeling and also using a Bayesian estimation where we make inference about behavior from prior information that we have, and including the behavior of similar individuals. So this concludes my kind of preliminary part about what it is. And now I have 4 case studies, and I will try to spend about 5 minutes if I have on each of these case studies. The first one is managed lane discounts. So this is similar. I mean, this is kind of close to price discrimination, but the idea is we are not price is regulated in the case of managed lanes. There is an algorithm usually that determines what the price should be. We want to offer a discount to people that will allow us to improve traffic conditions. So that's the idea. The managed lane, just in case you're not familiar with the concept, is there is a congested highway, and sometimes in the median or next to it, there is another lane or more than one lane that is tolled. And so there's a point on the road where you get the bifurcation, where you choose between the general purpose, it's called general purpose lane, GP, or the managed lane, which is tolled. Usually these projects in the US are what's known as P3 or PPP for private public partnership or public-private partnership. I don't know what comes first. And then these P3 projects, the concessionaire is a private company that collect the revenue. Sometimes some of the revenue go back to the public agency. Sometimes it is primarily used to finance the construction of this toll lane, etc. And so when you come to this bifurcation, there is a display. The display will show what the price is, and the price often can change the toll can change every 5 minutes. And the idea is to maintain the managed lane congestion free. So there is always the idea of these P3 highway project is to maintain an uncongested option to driver, but they have to pay for it. And but the question is, if there is capacity available, unused on the managed lane, and we can divert some traffic from the general purpose lane, why not do that? Because then you relieve congestion. So that's what the objective here. So subscriber, you have to subscribe it. You have to have an app, of course. And when you're planning to make a trip, depending on traffic conditions, you may be offered a discount. And so the display is the same for everybody, and just some people will be offered a discount relative to whatever is on display. And so in terms of who do we offer the discount to, that's where we have actionable heterogeneity. If you subscribe to to this opportunity, if you want to have this opportunity to receive a discount, we have observed your behavior in the past. And so XN is primarily the time of travel and past behavior. And we have a model based on observing individuals. We have a model of a choice between, so given a driver, given X, we can predict what's the probability of using the lane. We can calculate their price elasticity, and then we can calculate a discount. And the discount is based on some objective function that includes if there is available capacity on the managed lane, we would like to divert people and give benefit to some individuals so that everybody is better off because there is less congestion on the general purpose lane. So the objective function here had there were multiple objectives are listed here. The objective is revenue to the concessionaire, the operator of the managed lane, the capture rate. I mean, the operator, in order to show that the usefulness, want to show that they are capturing significant traffic. And future revenue improvement. Once people begin to use the lane, there is some loyalty. And so if they want to maybe to promote their subscriber, like frequent miles type of program, if the private operator. And then the most important, maybe from a public sector perspective, is a congestion externality, being able to reduce congestion. And so we actually developed an algorithm also to optimize the display toll. And so here are 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is we optimize the toll but offer no discount. Scenario 2 is, or B, is the existing toll, the toll that right now are being practiced, but with optimized discounts. And one scenario C is, we optimize the display toll and optimize the discount. And the key conclusion here is that we can, by offering this discount, we can increase the capture rate and reduce travel time for everyone. So we can use the managed lane more effectively by offering this discount. Next case study is similar to my example in the beginning. This was a project sponsored by the Department of Energy and to offer targeted, customized incentive payments. So it was not a payment. The idea is that we're giving people tokens and then they can have an account with these tokens and use the tokens to buy goods and services, etc. So it's a personalized incentives. The idea is to save energy or to have people travel in a more sustainable way. We provide, the idea is to develop we developed actually, this is what you see, this is a screen display of an app that provide travel information and provide these token incentives. So it says, here's a trip, person reports a trip, here is for these trips, how you can, what token would offer you if you were to behave in a certain way. And so they can, the idea is the options that are being considered are different modes, different routes, or paths, different departure time, and even different driving styles. And the idea was to maximize, to use a fixed budget. We made assumption about different levels of budget. Given the budget, how to use it in an optimal way to maximize system-wide energy saving. And so the actionable heterogeneity framework in this case, the data is what we get during when the person subscribes to the app. We observe past behavior. We have a choice model. Again, the key behavioral parameter is what we expect people to do. And given what we expect people to do, we calculate potential energy savings from different modes. This is the same equation that I've shown you before. And we, at a system level, we come up with this value of energy saved are, and we can now calculate the token for different modes, for different options of mobility options. And we have done a simulation of this system for the central part of the Boston metropolitan area. And what we show that depending the horizontal axis is penetration of the app. So how many people are get opportunity to get these incentives, and we have a budget that we determine in terms of about on the order of like 10 cents per subscriber. And what we show is that the two different scenarios. One scenario is what people are expected to if they were offered no incentives, and the lower energy consumption, lower travel time is using the scenario, providing this incentive, and how people are expected to respond to the incentives. So we have a budget here that if we just distribute it uniformly, 10 cents per person, we get no effect. But if we target it and offer it according to this algorithm, we simulate that there could be a significant effect. The case study 3 is a project actually in Toronto, Canada. And so far you've seen that I did not mention that the managed lane results are for a location in Texas, someplace near Dallas, Texas. The second simulation was in Boston. This is in Toronto, Canada. And in Toronto, Canada, there is a lot of congestion for east-west traffic going through Toronto. And that led to the construction of, again, it's a P3 project to a toll highway. So the red is, if you're familiar with the area, is Highway 401 that goes through Toronto, and it's usually heavily congested. Before and after the 407, the blue is a road called 407. So the 407 was, as I said, constructed by a private consortium of companies, and it is tolled. And in general, people think, the opinion is that the tolls are very high. So 407 is congested only during short time during the day. 401 is congested for a long time every day. But what 407 achieved for Toronto is that there is now a non-congested option to go east-west from Toronto. But the question is, there's a lot of, the toll is very high, there's a lot of revenue being collected here. The revenue were designed to finance the construction of the road, which it did. But could we also use some of the toll revenue to improve public transportation? So the way we applied the heterogeneity here, was to try to use some of the revenue. It's called refunding, to use the revenue from the toll to fund public transportation. So, for example, there is currently, in the last, since the beginning of this year, I think there is a congestion charging scheme in New York City where all the revenues go to improve public transportation, but the improvement to public transportation have not been specified. The users of public transportation or the people affected by the toll were not told how the transit improvement money is going to be used. So here what we try to show, can you have a targeted refunding, user refunding, user revenue, some of the toll revenue to fund public transportation improvement, but do it in a targeted way. So that's the idea, targeted improvement in public transportation. So the tool that we used here was a micro simulation, or like a digital twin of Toronto, where we create a synthetic population. And then we simulate, we find if we if 407 was toll-free, and then compare it to the situation where 407 is tolled, there are winners and losers. There are people that are going, we identify where the losers are, and these are the red dots on this map. So the red dots are people that, when you compare the two scenarios, the no toll versus the toll scenario, are worse off, meaning they suffer from more congestion, because if you toll the blue road, if it is being tolled, then traffic will divert to the red area, to the red road and to the other highways, and people in that area will therefore have more congestion, and they are the losers. So the question was, okay, can we come up with a personalization algorithm that will, or a targeting algorithm that will direct the transit improvement to compensate the losers? So we identify origin and destination pairs, travelers that are using for a given, we aggregate travelers to origin to destination, and summed up their losses in terms of consumer surplus. So the model, the behavioral model here is an activity-based model, and we can calculate the loss of consumer surplus to these individuals. And given this consumer surplus, we then take some of the toll revenue and allocate them to different ODs and look for potential transit improvement for these specific ODs. And so this is the algorithm for allocating the revenue, the refunding algorithm, identify the markets. These are the ODs that were the travelers with OD with toll road usage under the no toll. We calculate the loss of consumer surplus, we allocate the budget, then we have some constraint. We don't spend the budget unless it's being improved occupancy of transit, etc. So there are some efficiency constraints, we are calling them here, in terms of occupancy and minimum headway. And so this is allocation. So you see here where the beneficiaries from the refunding of the toll are shown here by the green colored locations. And so in terms of overall benefits, we look here at 3 scenarios. The scenario one, first one is no revenue recycling. Just we have the situation that existed in 2019. That's the year for which we could get data. So that's kind of the base. Then we have targeted revenue recycling, meaning where we identify individual losers and try to compensate them, and non-targeted revenue recycling, where we just kind of spread the revenue more uniformly. And so if you look at 3 different potential objectives here, the total social welfare, and here are the 3 scenarios, and clearly there is a benefit from having the congestion, the tolling there. It leads to having a non-congested option. But if we use some of the tolling in a targeted way, we can generate significant benefits, as shown here. And this is a non-targeted refunding. And this is a revenue change to public transportation in Toronto, and these are potential emissions. Finally, the 4th case study is trying to have more customized public transportation. The idea of mass transit is that it's fixed schedule, fixed route. It's not, it's clearly not efficient in low density areas, or it can provide an additional kind of public transportation. We called it flexible mobility on demand. And the idea of flexible mobility on demand is that you have a fleet, probably minibuses, as shown in this picture. And this fleet can be used in 3 different ways. One is as a taxi, regular taxi, like meaning door-to-door service at a high cost. Shared taxi, meaning you may have to share the ride with an additional pickup and drop-offs along the way. But still, it takes you from an origin to a destination. And then some sort of a adaptive bus service that goes from stop to stop, not from door to door, but it is on demand, meaning the schedule is based on demand, and people are given origin and destination. They are provided stop-to-stop travel on a minibus. So that was the idea that how we can use a fleet of vehicles in the most efficient way. And so the idea was to develop an algorithm that given a potential traveler that issuing a request from a trip from A to B, the traveler is then given options, given at least these, at most, 3 options. There is a 4th option always, which is to reject this particular service. And so the traveler gets an offer on their smartphone, and then they can choose. And so the idea is that the menu being offered is personalized. It's designed for a particular person. And there is an objective function. The objective function could be to maximize consumer surplus. Suppose that the government, public sector is operating this fleet of vehicle, then we want to make customer as satisfied as possible. So we may want to, the cost is fixed. We have a cost of maintaining this fleet. The fleet is fixed. So by maximizing consumer surplus, we would use it in the most efficient way for the public. Or it can be private operator. It can be operated to maximize profit. Or it could be a service where you want as many people as possible to use it. You want to maximize people switching from other modes maybe. And so that's called the hit rate. So these are the objectives. Customer needs to subscribe, therefore customer has a profile. We may observe, we know the origin, destination, departure, and arrival time. There could be a party size. We have a choice model, how people select between the different options. And the action is in an optimal menus, a personalized menu that are designed to achieve one of these objectives or weighted objectives. The application here was a simulation in Singapore. So this is the map of Singapore. And the idea was to take the central area of Singapore and in this pink area in the middle to provide this new mode that's available, called FMOD. So the location is Singapore, extended CBD area. There are 2 scenarios here. The base scenario is the existing situation where the modes that are available in this area are taxi, private car, MRT, which is like the metro, and bus. And we introduce the FMOD. This results that we show here is for a fleet of 500 vehicles. And the assumption is that 10% of all the travelers, this is just a simulation, have subscribed to the service. And the numbers that we are showing you here are for the morning peak period. And so this in this area, we try different objective functions. We can say, suppose that this is a private operator that is maximizing their profit, or it's a public operator maximizing consumer surplus. And so we evaluate the introduction of this new mode from the perspective of the consumer, the operator, and the network performance in terms of congestion. And so the network performance in general has been that we have a significant reduction in congestion by people using this type of service. Maybe similar travel times, but overall less congestion. If the objective function is, if it is a private operator that maximizes profit, it turns out that they will benefit more if they emphasize the taxi option and the shared taxi as opposed to the bus, and they can make more profit. And so the consumer tend to reject it more frequently. Whereas if the objective function is to maximize the user satisfaction or consumer surplus, then usually they're offered more options and the rejection is lower. And this just shows that the difference in congestion and this central area of Singapore. So FMOD improves this kind of personalized, customized public transportation, improves the network performance by reducing congestion, and then it is clearly has a potential to use a fleet efficiently by using it in that way. So to conclude, I want to say that I have hopefully convinced you that personalized strategies based on actionable heterogeneity can be effective in developing sustainable and equitable solution. I think the purpose of the case study was to show how personalized incentives can be used to nudge people toward transit and bike. By targeted revenue recycling from a toll road, we can improve public transportation in an effective way and fair way. That dynamic pricing and personalized discounts is an effective way to use managed lane more efficiently and reduce congestion. And that finally, that the customized public transportation is a way of making public transportation more effective and a good kind of complement to mass transit. So the actionable heterogeneity, I wanted to make some key points to conclude about actionable heterogeneity. I think that it is can be used to develop effective personalization strategies. It's important to uncover it for prediction, and it has very effective personalization. There are many types of method that I demonstrated it in these case studies, but in practice, it is often just done by experiment. So there are a lot of, every time you go on the web and you use Amazon or something like Amazon, you may be a subject of an experiment. I know that from personal experience. I was an advisor of some of these companies that are doing it. And so there are experiments all the time from which you can find out about actionable heterogeneity. So if you are not a student of choice modeling like I am, there's still hope for you to capture actionable heterogeneity, because this experiment, there is software to do this experiment, and it's very effective. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have time for question. Take the microphone if you want to be heard.
Okay. Thank you. It was very clear, very illuminating. But ask you a general question from an economic point of view. I mean, does your analysis imply that perfectly discriminating monopolist of some sort is preferable from social point of view and from the efficiency point of view to any other type of management system of the traffic in both in the city and out of the city? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. You're talking about the monopolist?
Yeah.
And
yeah, because it is essentially the model here is a perfectly discriminating monopolist model. There is an objective, an agent that maximizes something. This is especially true for F mode, because you have maximization of profit, and you maximize profit by discriminating as well as you can, tendentially perfectly discriminating by your customers.
But it's not, FMOD was not a monopolist because you can always reject it. There is other services available. So in FMOD is being offered, it can be offered by other companies, multiple companies. In my assumption, there was one provider, but this provider is competing against mass transit, it's competing against car, competing against walking. So it's not, you can reject FMOD. I mean, it's not there is competition.
Yeah, but generally, the perfectly discriminating monopolist achieves his objective by expropriating the consumer surplus. Now, if I understand you find a way to combine the consumer surplus maximization with the maximization of profit. So is that some kind of Nash equilibrium? Or, I mean, how do you achieve that balance? Because typically there are two antithetic effects.
Yeah. So I think this question relates more to the system level. So the idea is that when you, at a system level, a lot of transportation services are regulated. So you cannot, like a public transport operator, often as fares are regulated. The toll road, the managed lane operator is subject to a concession agreement, which regulates what they can and cannot do. So you may say that an operator of a managed lane is a monopolist, but they are not, because they are competing against the general purpose highway. And so there is competition, and what they can charge is fully regulated. So in terms of price discrimination, perfect price discrimination, it's not possible. They cannot do that. So they determine the display price that they can change every 5 minutes using an algorithm that has to be approved by the regulator. So the regulator regulates how much it can change every 5 minutes. It regulates what will be the minimum occupancy of the lane. You have to have some traffic on the lane. Anyhow, there are constraints. And so given that the public sector, the government has issued this concession agreement that determines what they can charge, now the operator, what we say in our personalization strategy is now this operator can offer discounts. Why? Because they have unused capacity and they can offer discount. And the regulator, of course, will not object to that. And they're actually doing it. So they're not using exactly the algorithm that we have done, but it's not perfect competition. I'm sorry, perfect discrimination, because they don't fix the price for every person, and they don't, and they just offer discount relative to a regulated price.
There was another question. Okay, there then.
Thank you, Moshe. So interesting. In your example 3, you have some location where you have all the losers and the other location where you have all the winners. So if you think of the long run, several years, people should relocate and the real estate prices should go down in the red region and up in the green region. What is the difference in the long run between what you do and what the market would do in terms of welfare, in terms of all your criteria?
The answer is I don't know. But yeah, I take your point. There are short, long-term effects that will take place. The solution that we are demonstrating here is something very short run. We collect toll all the time. And every time we collect tolls, there are locations which have more congestion because we collect the toll and we just want to compensate them. So we compensate them with public transportation. Maybe in the long run, where people move away from these areas that are congested, then if there are no losers, there may be no refunding. So this can change. It's not something that is permanent. It's just like on an ongoing basis, you collect tolls. Some of it should be used to fund the people that are, because the toll exists, some people are benefiting because they have travel time saving. Other people are worse off because because of the toll, they have more congestion. You provide to them better public transportation. Now, there will be long-term effect, I hope, but the refunding will be changing. It's not a, I hope I answered your question.
Okay. Moise?
So thank you. First, I'm already convinced that targeting is useful. But I was just wondering that there is simultaneously an issue that I'm facing myself is with respect to the units, because targeting agents, okay, that is the main focus, but agents may not be the main unit because you have households, close people. So targeting groups sometimes can simultaneously interact with targeting specific people. In practice, it is not, I myself do not find an easy way to deal with that issue. I don't know if you have made some progress or.
I mean,
considering households, for example, instead of agents.
It depends on the application. I mean, in the case of the managed lanes, the unit is a motor vehicle, the driver. So we don't care who is in the car, just the driver. And in the case of the say the Toronto refunding transit improvement, the unit is a traveler. You know, we have people making trip. It's an OD trip that is this benefit, has a negative benefit from the tolling. In each case, it's different. And so the unit of demand, you're right. I mean, there are all kind of maybe interactions and people can travel together, but this is very operational. People are showing up. They take the app and they say, okay, I want to go from A to B. And here I'm giving you some options. If you're traveling with your wife or without your wife, it's your problem. Right?
Okay, but does it impact trip chaining, for example, or is it, so it is not an issue if you look just at the trip in case?
Yeah, if you have a complicated trip chaining, you make a choice. I mean, you make a good choice decision and you decide. In this case, no matter what you do before or after, you have a choice between the managed lane or the general purpose lane. That's what we are managing, that's all. But you're right. I mean, in terms of user behavior or traveler behavior, yeah, we have to, at the system level, we have to begin with household, with the location, the residential location. So I was dealing today not at the system level, but at the level of an individual making a trip.
Thank you for a very nice presentation. I have two questions. One is that the way I understand this is that...
Mathieu,
Sorry?
move down.
The way I
Mathieu was
understand...
between us.
Sorry. The way I understand this is that what you call actionable heterogeneity has already been used quite a lot by many private companies to maximize profits. And what you're saying is that we can use it for a better purpose.
Exactly.
Right. Now, that sounds to me like a good argument for getting rid of some of these companies, like Uber, for example, no, seriously, and replacing them with public concerns or cooperatives, as has happened in some places. Would you support that? Or that's one question. And
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
No, what I'm saying is that these private...
The question is, how do we coerce a company like Uber to work in the public interest?
Yeah. Why not get rid of them and have a public interest institution
Okay, so let me
take
answer
charge
this
of these
question.
algorithms.
Yeah, so this is a very common question for all these P3 projects. You know, why shouldn't why have a private company doing it? Why not the government? And then especially when you have infrastructure projects where these private companies are making a killing, you know, and they're making so much money. And the answer is that very often the private sector have efficiency methods that in the public sector for some reason do not exist. If you can make the public sector as efficient as these toll road operators, then yeah, it should be the public sector. I completely agree with you.
There are cases like in India, there's a public cooperative called Bharat Taxi, which is trying to displace these profit maximizing taxi companies. And I think they have some potential. Anyway, I accept your answer. The other question is about this fairness criterion, substantive fairness,
Yes.
which is basically Pareto improvement. That doesn't take into account the fact that people could have inequality aversion.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
No, there could be inequality aversion on top of that. I mean, like this managed lanes.
Yes, there will be inequality, yeah.
Like in the managed lanes, basically you're allowing some people to jump the queue by paying, right?
Yes.
And some people may not like that, even though they gain in terms of time because congestion is reduced, but they may still feel that this is not fair, that you're allowing some people to pay and jump the queue. So yeah. I think sometimes people would accept it and sometimes not.
Yeah, so the concept that I think is guiding all this is the Pareto improvement. And some people will be better off, other people will not. And so there is a difference in equality, then you have this concept of procedural fairness. And
procedural fairness is the algorithm being the same for everybody.
Yes.
So that will not take care of inequality.
Yeah, absolutely not, yeah. But you have the same opportunity. I mean, the same algorithm will be used for you and for me, and you will get an incentive, I will get nothing. And I said, well, that's a game. That's a game being played here. You're better off, I'm not worse off. So we have to accept it at some point for the benefit of society.
I think we are more or less close the discussion, because otherwise the second speaker will be very upset. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's time. So we are very happy to have our last guest speaker. I don't know if you are speaking alone in your Cascetta, but because I see also Marie-Elisabeth, who is a co-author at least of the PowerPoint. And well, you have been professor in many places, University of Naples, now Mercatorium. You spend many years, if I sum the months in MIT, and well, when I am outside Italy, I say, okay, if you want to have Mr. Transportation in Italy, I mention your name to make it short. So, well, this is very much in the line with the conference, transportation and sustainability. And it's also a little bit in line with the talk of last year, Jean-Baptiste Fresso's evolution and revolution. He spoke about that, about natural resource. So you have the floor. And we know we are a little bit late, so let's try to finish, let's say, 1:45 question included, more or less. More or
Okay,
less.
more or less. Okay. Thank you for invitation in the first place. It's been a pleasure to be here for 3 days. I met a lot of friends, starting from Andre and Moshe and most of you. So, I mean, I want to skipping all the introductions because we don't have time enough. I want to focus on the concept that technology is changing the way in which transportation systems will operate. That's for sure. The point is how and when. So my starting point is very simple. It starts from the fact of how much transportation system are, costly from the environmental and social point of view. We know all that transportation is an essential good. Without transportation, all of you and myself wouldn't be here. And without transportation, this computer and everything would be here. So transportation is necessary for our society to work as we know it works, but it comes with a price. And the price is in terms of energy consumption and related CO2 emissions. The price comes to with local pollutants and with accidents. So all these three main unsustainable effects of transportation are very much at the center of the research, of the public debate. And my point is that all three of these externalities, unsustainable externalities, are going to change due to the technological changes, disruptive changes that we are going through in these years. Let's start with a very short picture of how things are right now. I mean, transportation accounts for 31% of CO2 emissions in Europe, while they account only for 15% of the CO2 emissions at the world level. So developed world countries consume and emit more than the rest of the world. We know about that. In Europe, for instance, transportation accounts for, as I said, 30%, more than 30%, and car and trucks and buses, what we call road transportations, is the majority of these, is a vast majority of these emissions. More than 70% of CO2 emissions today in Europe. Obviously, this figure changes with different countries, but on the whole, over all 27 European countries, transportation accounts for more than 70% of CO2 emissions. In Europe, we are reducing CO2 emissions, constantly since the 90s. But this reduction, which has been by 35% approximately, is due to sectors different from transportation. Transportation, as a matter of fact, is increasing the absolute CO2 emissions. And of course, since other sectors like housing and industry, etc., are reducing the emissions, so the fraction, the share of CO2 transport-related emissions is constantly increasing. But still, on the whole, the CO2 emissions are reducing in Europe. Then there are other externalities related to what we call local pollutants, in the sense that the emission of these pollutants is dangerous for the health, basically, but at a local level. So while CO2 emissions are negative at the global level because of global warming, all these other pollutants like particle matter, NO2, O3, and so on and so forth, all these other pollutants are local in the sense that they are negative just in the area in which they are emitted. Most of these pollutants are related to transportation, to traffic, to transportation more in general. In European cities, the fraction varies according to a number of factors, including whether the city is a port city or is not, because ports produce a lot of those pollutants. But in addition to that, what should be stressed is that the tailpipe production of those pollutants is quite marginal nowadays. I mean, the regulations are such that new cars, whatever are the engine, internal combustion engine as well, they have limitation. Euro 6 car doesn't pollute anymore in terms of PM, NOx, etc., etc. So the pollution comes mostly from brakes, from wear and tears of tires, and so on. So these are there. And the third externality, of course, is human lives. And human lives are being saved. The number of deaths in Europe is going down, but from 51,000 per year to 19,000 per year. So it went down a lot. But we Europeans set this zero vision target. We want to reach the zero death objective by 2050. And the rate at which road deaths are reducing is below the rate that should be kept to reach this zero death objective. So this is for Europe. At the world level, things are way worse off. In Europe, we said we reduce CO2 emissions related to transportation by overall CO2 emissions by 35%. In the same period in the world, they increased by 79%. And all sectors increased their CO2 emissions because of development of non-OECD countries and the United States as well. I mean, the United States is an OCDE country, but is not reducing. They are not reducing the CO2 footprint. At the end, Europe counts only for 9% of overall CO2 emissions in the world. So even if Europe, we were successful to reach, and we are not going in that direction, I will show you in a minute. But even if Europe were successfully reaching the zero CO2 emission target, then the world emissions will be reduced today only by 9%. And by 2050, the rest of the world will increase the CO2 emissions by way more than 9%, okay? So this is the picture of how things are right now. So United States, 20%, China, 11%, Europe, 9%, and so on and so forth. Those countries which have the lowest fraction of CO2 emissions are the ones growing more fastly. Just to give you another hard figure on that, this is, in the table, this is a number of per capita cars owned by different continents. And you see that in Europe, we are at 0.56 cars per inhabitant, including babies. On the average, in Italy, we are 0.7. Okay, so this is Europe. North America is 0.82. All the other countries are way, way, way below these numbers. 0.2. Oceania, it's at the American level, it's in between. Africa is 0.08. So the potential for growing the number of cars in the world is enormous, because if none of the countries would ever reach something half the car ownership that we have in the Western world, however you want to call it, there will be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of new vehicles running on the world's roads. As a matter of fact, here is the number of cars sold per year since the COVID crisis in 2019. And you see that the continents that have passed the pre-COVID level are Asia, Africa, while the mature countries are still there. This to imply that the new continents are the ones. And these are the number of electric cars sold in the world. Is less than 25% of the cars sold every year. And most of this 25% is coming from China. You see the blue bars. China EVs, China plug-in electric vehicles, the rest. Europe is green, the rest is. So this is the picture of what's happening to now. I mean, right now, while we are talking. With trucks, things are even worse. The electrification of trucks is still at the very initial phase of the process. So they are substantially running on gasoline, oil. And for the future, I mean, these are the prospected GDP growth rates for different continents in the world. And as you may notice, the continents with the prospect of larger growth are the ones who have the lower number of cars, car ownership, and that produce less CO2, etc., etc. So perspectives are very gloomy at this point, and they are. Let's face it, they are. And with safety, the things are the same. In Europe, we had this 19,000 deaths on the road per year. At world level, we have 1.2 deaths per year. 1.2 deaths per year. I mean, if you compare to the number of deaths of any of the wars we are having in the world, there is no comparison. And most of these deaths are in none of the countries. And they are not reducing. 50% of these deaths are related to pedestrian cyclists, so vulnerable users. So, to sum up, Europe in some way is reducing the unsustainability of our transportation system, however, more slowly than we would have liked, but the rest of the world is not. I want to give you another few numbers coming out of research we carried out in Italy about the perspective of us Europeans to reach our European, remember that we are talking about 9% of the overall world emissions. With this 9%, we are very ambitious. We are as a European. We set a number of objectives, expecting that there are a number of inconsistent EU directives, and I won't have time to discuss in detail, so trust me on the word. But from one side, we expect to reduce CO2 emissions or overall road systems by 100% by 2050 and by 43% by 2030. 2030 is in 4 years, okay? With respect to 2008. So 2008 was the reference year. By 2030, 40% less than 2008. This for the overall system pollution. But for new vehicles, the current, decision is that no internal combustion engine vehicles, cars to be more precise, and vans could be sold beyond 2035. So by 2035, the CO2 emissions of new vehicles will be zero. Tailpipe emissions, I discuss about that in a minute, but only 90% of trucks will be zero emission vehicles. So these two objectives are conflicting in the sense that if no new cars and trucks are sold, there is no way of reducing by 43% the total emissions. So in Europe, we think that there are a number of policies to reduce CO2 emissions from transportations. These policies can be classified according to the classic avoid, shift, improve scheme. Avoid policies are related to reducing the number of trips, such as we heard a couple of days ago, teleworking, or other policies meant to reduce the number of trips. Shift are policies aimed to shift mode, support people not using more energy consuming, more CO2 emitting modes like car and using public transport or biking or whatever. And then improve policies are the ones in which if you have to use your car, and we are still using it a lot, then why don't you use an electric car? So a car that is less improved, the energy efficiency and emission footprint during its movements. And the research that I'm presenting very, very shortly here was funded, is conducted, is published in a number of papers around the world, but the subject carrying it is this Sunrise Most Observatory on road transportation in Italy. There are a number of institutional and non-institutional partners. There are a number of universities. And this research is based on a number of very, very large data. I want to stress the fact that we talk about trillions of elementary data, and I'll say a few words after that. So in this research, we, first of all, sort of reconstructed how road transportation works in Italy. And this reconstruction is by no means trivial in the sense that all official statistics are way off the market. They do not know, they do not reproduce the real road transportation in Italy, in the country. And I'm sure that the same holds true for most European countries. We reconstructed what we think is the closest representation to the truth of real transportation, road transportation in the country, using, as I said, an integrated approach, combining black boxes, 1 million of black boxes in vehicles, who gave for 1 month, who gave us second per second position of the vehicle, so speed, acceleration, everything, plus telco data for overall demand. combining all this data, merging all this data with official statistics like origin destination flows from motorway in Italy, public roads. I mean, it was a very tough work of combining different data sets to get a very fine, detailed picture of road transportation in Italy. So we could compute how many cars of different type, internal combustion, rather than hybrid or electric, or trucks or vans, use local roads, trunk roads, motorways, north, south. I mean, the closest, as I said, to the real phenomenon, reproducing exactly the CO2 emissions and the energy consumption of road transportation in Italy. At least on that, we have very good data. We know how many millions of liters of gasoline we sell in the country because we pay taxes on that. And so the second part of the effort was to simulate the effects of ongoing policies, ongoing national policies. Some of those policies are funded by PNRR. Yesterday we discussed about that, yes. And most PNRR, substantial fraction of PNRR funds are functional to funding new railways project, both at an urban level and mostly at an extra-urban level. Plus, other policies that are in place in Italy, including the subsidies to buy electric vehicles. And so all these policies were simulated in two scenarios, because obviously to reach 2030 and 2035, which were the two simulated years, we had to make assumptions about GDP growth, about renewal rate of cars by households, by commercial vehicles. I mean, I won't bore you with all the assumptions that had to be made in order to forecast future vehicle kilometers and CO2 emissions. But the final word is that we won't make it even in the best of cases. So if we see the 2005 levels, about 2024, we are only 6% below in terms of vehicle kilometers and 14% below in terms of CO2 emissions. But by 2030, even in the best of options, the optimistic scenario in which the economy doesn't grow, which is very realistic, unfortunately, but people will change a lot their cars, and they will buy a lot of electric vehicles. So, I mean, they are extreme scenarios, not meant to be realistic. They are just the upper and lower bound, we thought. So even in this case, we are way below the 43%. In the best of cases, we are 24%. In some cases, we are only 10%. So this means worse off with respect to now. So we are recarbonizing transportation in Italy, and this is given in this slide. These are the CO2 emissions computed by the number of liters of CO2 emitting carbon-based fuels. These are from 2002. You see they went down up to 2019, not because of any policies, but just because Italy has been going through a severe economic crisis. So we had the stagnation, we had a crisis that put down the traffic and consumptions. But since 2019, we are sort of recovering. So the consumptions of CO2 and emissions of CO2 are raising again. So we are, while we are talking, we are recarbonizing our transportation system. And the two future trajectories are the ones that I described before. So we won't make it, not even in 2035, we will reach the target supposed to be reached by 2030. So this is gloomy, as I said, picture. Europe is the best in the world, according to numbers, in the effort to reduce unsustainable externalities of transportation, but still we are lagging behind. So the problem, the part of the most optimistic part of this conference is what we have to expect from technological innovation. Everything is changing, and is changing in a way that can be classified according to different models, to different view. This is a sort of transportation history view that my colleagues and I are putting forward since a few years. And we think that the history of transportation from the beginning of humankind, from Homo sapiens, we are having technological transformation, which are just evolutions, or there are very few of those technology transformations brought revolutions. By revolutions, we mean something that has changed the economy and the society in which the innovation was proposed. We obviously are not saying that the technological innovation caused this change, so the causal relationship is shady, but we say that without that innovation, that change would not have been possible. So in the history of humankind, we sort of selected 6 revolutions before now. The first was the animal traction. Before that, Homo sapiens just walked on their feet. And then the wheel, the sail, the traction, the power traction, the steam traction, then the internal combustion engine, and then the container logistics. So all of these revolutions had a number of evolutions over time, and we selected sort of 2 general principles about that. One is that new revolutions typically make use of previous ones. Our cars still use wheel, right? And the container ships still use internal combustion engines. So, I mean, there is a super additivity, and the other common feature is that what we call the heterogeneity of the objectives. So some innovations came out for a certain objective or were prompted for certain objectives and allowed to have different effects. Again, I could make a number of examples. I will skip those. And I want to give you a flavor of what I mean by revolution, showing you how closely related are the shape and dimensions of cities to the technology, the transportation technology that allows that city to work. We have a concept in transportation analysis which has been discovered and checked over and over and over the last 50, 60 years with the concept of travel time budget. So the idea is that on average, people do not want to spend more than, on average, 1 hour traveling each day. Perhaps this is also some physiological or, other reason, but this number has been turning again and again. It could, obviously, is an average. There are people spending 10 minutes and people spending 2 hours, but on the average, this is the travel time budget per person, per average person, average day. So a city is a community of individuals who have to interact among themselves and interact with the functions of the city. So in order to this to happen, the city has to allow people to travel and communicate among them with a travel time which is below or is compatible with this travel time budget. This is just a very simple mathematical model showing you in a hypothetical circular city of radius r, which is the average distance, travel distance, between any pair of points. There have been developments of this model, but the final result is that the average distance is in the range of r, the radius. So go and back is 2r equal d, the diameter. So if this assumption is true, means that the diameter of a city across history should not be larger than would be allowed by the transport technology of the time. And this is exactly what happens in history. All ancient cities had a diameter which was below 5 kilometers. Rome, at the maximum expansion, had a diameter of 5 kilometers, which is compatible with 5 kilometers per hour, which is the speed of a cart. And all the cities before and after that were below that dimension, so were compatible with the travel time budget. Before the railway revolution, so it was the fourth revolution, where the speed was allowed to be larger, 20, 30 kilometers per hour, but was available only along certain lines. So the rail city in Europe, at least, is the old ancient city plus those antennas related to the railway lines with a distance of up to 20 kilometers for a city center, like has been the case for Paris, for London, for all the cities that started the railway network, and then others. And then we had the fourth revolution, the internal combustion engine, the car. So the average speed rose to 30, 35 kilometers, but mostly we had the possibility to reach point to point. So we had the urban sprawl. The cities have large diameters and have lower densities out of the inner center that was probably the heritage of pre-car, pre-rail cities. So this is about the history. This is about how innovation, in our view, technology innovation in transportation has impacted the city form, the city dimension, but obviously has impacted everything else. Just to make a quote, we are living in a globalized world allowed by the revolution in container logistics. We reduced cost, intercontinental sea costs by factor of 20. So we could produce any goods anywhere in the world and move it because it doesn't cost almost anything to move it for 14,000 kilometers from China to Mediterranean or to North Europe. So if all this is true, we are in a phase of changes, of technological changes in transportation. And we have been through a number of decades since World War II, basically, in which we have just evolved our transportation systems. These are pictures for the Italian one, but I'm sure that you have the two chevaux and, okay. So we have the same cars, the same trains, different. I mean, they evolved, but not revolutionized anything. And planes, etc., etc. Now we are just in the middle of technological innovations with respect to three main factors. There are three simultaneous, this is the point, three simultaneous innovation avenues. One is decarbonization, The other is autonomous and connected driving. And the third is digitalization and new transportation services. They are all happening as we are talking. And we know it. About decarbonization, we want to move from the fossil fuels to non-fossil, renewable ones. And obviously, we have different, I will skip this part, but we have different engines. Different engines using different energy sources. We have traditional internal combustion engine that is efficient in mechanical terms up to 40% of efficiency in the best cases, produce CO2 emissions, both while it's used and before it was used because gasoline had to be extracted, oil had to be extracted, refined, moved, and so on. So well to wheel, from the extraction to refinement to distribution to use, the overall impact is, in terms of kilometers or well to wheel, it's about 223 200 grams per kilometer. Okay, so these are the average number of average car, etc., etc. Then you have biofuels that are a good, intermediate things that allows to pollute less by using the same cars or the same trucks that you already had. So they are extracted for biomasses, and so they have a biomass gains credit in the phase in which they are produced. And then obviously you have electricity. But electricity is not zero emitting as we wish to believe, in the sense that electricity has to be produced. So the CO2 emissions depend also on the production, the way electricity is produced. And in Europe, in Italy, we have a 40% fraction of renewable electricity. So we have a 40% fraction of free CO2 energy for electric cars, but the 60% of electricity is produced through gas or other sources, even carbon. Okay? And in China, they are the first in terms of electric cars, but the electricity is not as renewable as we would like to be. They're still, while we are talking, they are still building massive coal plants, okay? So they have electric cars, but the energy is produced by coal, in addition to other sources. In the best of cases, produced by gas. So, the electricity is not clean by definition. This is the message I want to give you. The whole chain has to be clean. So if we improve, as we hope, the fraction of renewable electricity, then electric vehicles, as I believe, will be the technology for road transportation. For cars, first, light vehicles, light good vehicles, second, and finally for trucks. But it will take time. It will take time because we have a huge capital of existing vehicles. So it will not be easy to replace. It's not quick to replace. In Italy alone, we have 40 million vehicles running in our roads. So how long will it take to substitute 40 million vehicles with 4% change rate per year? You make the calculation. Okay, so this is the realistic, but this revolution, this innovation is already there. They are doing it. Somebody talks about hydrogen. This is still down the road, in my opinion, but I won't spend more time about that. You are familiar with the team. Then we have autonomous driving. 5 levels of autonomous driving. 012 is assisted driving. All your cars, new cars, have assisted driving. Level 3, level 4, and level 5 are the real self-driving vehicles. 3, you must sit at the driving seat. You don't use your hand, you don't use your feet, but you have to look at the road. There is a camera just watching your eyes, and if you are not looking to the street, the car stops. Level 3 cars are already among us. Perhaps we don't know, perhaps they are still disguised, but they are among us. They are produced by Tesla, tested in the Netherlands, tested in Estonia, in the United States. Level 4 cars are cars in which you don't even need to be sitting at the driving place, like robotaxis in the United States, Waymo, and WeRide. WeRide is Chinese and Waymo is American. So the difference between level 3 and level 4 is level 4 in a certain area, city of San Francisco, drive on its own. You call it, you come to pick you up, you go to a certain place, the car drives autonomously, then leave you there, and you are done. Level 5, this thing will happen everywhere. So the level 5 autonomous vehicle will not have any driving wheel, no accelerator. The accelerator will be a totally different vehicle. We don't have yet vehicle 5 for production, while we have vehicle level 3 and level 4. As I said, there are several producers, and the largest investments on autonomous driving are not made by car makers, but are made by advanced technology players. Okay? So billions of euros every year are spent for autonomous driving. And how long will it take to deploy autonomous driving vehicles in the world? There are several forecasts. So far, they've been failing in the sense that it was expected that autonomous driving would be here sooner than it effectively is. And people expect that will be used first in China, then in North America, and then in Europe last. In Europe, because of our regulations, the moral dilemma of Einstein against the baby, forgetting that there are 1.2 million deaths on the roads every year. So, but almost no one dubbed that in, say, 10, 20 years, at least level 3 cars and vehicles will be available, will be widely available. And obviously, vehicles are not just cars, not private cars. There are buses. And with buses, the possibilities are even larger because they run along repetitive routes, at least conventional ones. We already have WeRide in China. WeRide is a Chinese company producing autonomous driving buses in several Chinese cities, and they are experimental in different European cities, from Prague to Barcelona and to Madrid. The third avenue of innovations, the third motorway of innovations is digitalization and all the new mobility services that are allowed by digitalization. All the things that Moshe talked about were possible because people had smartphones, and there were service providers giving you access to new services, setting new prices, and so on and so forth. So what these digitalized transportation services have in common? They share the fact that they are based on GPS, real-time location of vehicles and you, okay? They are based on the fact that there are somewhere remote computational capabilities suggesting you routes or just telling how long you'll take with Google Maps to get from here to Naples. We have smartphones. Everyone has smartphones. So smartphones were not available at all until 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to be more precise. Okay, so smartphones are among the enablers: GPS, smartphone, remote computing, plus feedback from users and so on. So these characteristics are common to a number of new services: info mobility, sharing mobility, smart pricing, as Moshe was discussing before, smart mobility, and smart control. I just go very quickly through a number of applications you already have on your phone and use perhaps without thinking about them. Okay, smart price, 2 minutes, yes. These are the et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting that public transportation has no longer to be, as in the 19th century, based on the line, bus line concept. You must deviate from the line. You could ask for your service, personalized service, and the routing, the optimal routing of the bus according to the demand. So these are demand responsive transit. This is the acronym that he used in the literature. So this is changing, is going to change significantly the way public transportation is provided. I will skip this one because Moshe already showed you the possibility of having different modes, the same vehicle, allowed by the technological innovation. But in Moshe's example, the vehicle was still driven by someone. Okay? So the next step is that if the vehicle drives by himself. So the new vehicles, just to sum up, use increasingly the decarbonized user sources, are increasingly safe, because all experiments show that assisted and autonomous vehicles are safer than human-driven, in some cases, drunk human-driven cars or trucks or buses. And new modes, new services, they will reduce CO2 possibly. They will increase the livelihood of cities. So they will have local effects. Best of the same. We will still have the same transportation system, but with vehicles that will run on electricity, will drive by themselves, so will be safer, and we will have the option to choose whether to use our car or use one of those shared services that are increasingly available. So this is not going to be a revolution. This will just be an evolution of the current system. People will still own their own car, will still have parking lots, they will choose among different modes, the cities will have the same shape, and so on and so forth. But there is the potential, is not said, only history will tell us, there is the potential for a revolution, something that will change the way transportation systems are organized today. And this revolution is based on the concept of shift from ownership to use. Instead of car ownership, car as a service. You don't own your cars, as we do, I mean, 0.6, 0.7 car per inhabitant, and the new world countries are going from 0.0 to something in this range. Instead of owning a car, you use the car because there are the possibility of using cars being provided by a service provider. It's like robo-taxis, but I don't like the term robo-taxis because it's related to something that you use in addition to having a car. No one doesn't own a car because there are taxis. I mean, car as a service is something that, this is the name I propose, is something that is related to the concept of substituting ownership of the car with service. I'm insisting on cars, but obviously the same could be said about vans, about trucks. But those vehicles are more used. Cars are the, symbol of irrationality. Think about it. One of your cars is weight 2,000 kilos to carry basically one person, say 80 kilos. They stay parked 95% of the time. And you pay tens of case, 10,000 euros, dollar, whatever you want, to use it for less than 5% of the time. And it occupies space. I will skip all the private evidence. I want just to give you a flavor of why this could be a revolution. This could be a revolution because the price of car as a service, mobility as a service, could be 1/10 of the current price of owning and running your own car. Okay? Could be comparable to the kilometer price of a bus. And will save space. A parked car uses 20 square meters. Multiplied by the number of cars, multiplied by the number of inhabitants, a city 1 million like Naples could, if half the population will switch to car as a service instead of owning the car, could gain on the whole a surface equivalent to Central Park. Just one picture from my city. This is one of the most iconic places. Square in the city is Piazza del Municipio. This is how it was. It was a parking lot basically until a couple of decades ago, and now it's a pedestrian walkable area. But this tendency to substitute, to reclaim, my word is to reclaim car parking space as we reclaim land from the sea. We have an incredible amount of useless city space, precious city space. 1 minute, yes. But I had less time than Moshe, right? On the fairness basis. Right? I'm just questioning the fairness of the thing. So there are already urban planners and urban designers who are thinking ahead. So they are reclaiming former car parks, car lots into new things. And there are cities that are already planning according to the fact that parking lots could be compatible with other functions. For instance, the height of a car park, it's unusable for anything else because it's very low ceiling, right? In Australia, sorry, you have to, in building new parking buildings, you must take into account that that building could be used, that space could be used for something else. Because parked cars will not necessarily be in future the user of those. But think about all the cars parked along the street. So the idea is that if you reclaim car parking space, cities could be very different. And you could allocate the space in different ways. It depends on the single city, the single situation, but you will have a lot of space that could be used for other uses. You could make things walkable. Walkability is a very important stream of thought that has been emerging everywhere, showing that it's not more healthy. So walking is healthier than not walking. We knew that, but also that the prices, the costs of buildings, of shops, of activities in walkable areas increase much more than with respect to non-walkable ones. So walkability is something that could be used much more than it is today because we have space freed from parked cars. So we are not discussing about a revolution that will change the dimensions of the city. Buildings are there. It's very difficult to go back. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't put in there again. But the same space, the same cities, the same could be used differently without thinking, and this is within the reachable of technological innovation. That's the point I want to leave you with. So will not be dimensions will change, but the use of the space could significantly change. So just to conclude, in spite of the fact I had less time, the current evolution of transportation systems is nothing to be optimistic about. So things are improving in Europe, but they are not necessarily improving worldwide. The expectation is that they will worsen worldwide, okay, in the foreseeable future. Significant sustainability results can be obtained at a local level because you have the technology. We now know how to reduce local pollutants, local accidents, and some good examples, city worldwide shows that. And the new technology, as Moshe made a few examples, but there are hundreds of policies allowed by new technologies like sharing, car sharing, bike sharing, all the forms of pricing. Pricing is still very rudimentary in its application, just cordon pricing almost everywhere, but could be much better. So cities could do significant efforts toward a more locally sustainable transportation. The global problem will be as it is, probably worse than it is. But as I said, there are possibilities of accelerating the processes through combining autonomous driving, electric vehicle, and digital new mobility services in car as a service or mobility as a service view. In that case, obviously, this revolution, we don't know whether it will happen, is going to happen, depends on a number of factors, how the capital is. But so people are investing a lot of money, companies are investing a lot of money, but for incremental improvements. They are investing in electric vehicles, new batteries, etc., etc. They are investing in autonomous driving. They are investing in digital services, but no one is still investing in the new paradigm of transportation services. Just one last word to my colleague modelers. We have to start almost from scratch. All the things that we knew about transportation system were related to old ones. I just make one example because all the rest is too long. Traffic theory. Traffic theory is based on human-driven cars. All the experiments, all the rules, all the functions, the delay functions, the capacity concept of capacity, etc., is everything related to human-driven vehicles. Human-driven vehicles started in 1908. In 1908, Ford started its first plant for producing the T model. Okay, 1908. Traffic theory was produced after World War II because some companies started to test congestion, because until then congestion was not an issue. But after World War II, congestion became an issue, and the highway manual and all the traffic studies started on experimental plans that simulate the impact of humanly driven vehicles with each other. Now, we know very little about how the traffic will perform if there are autonomous vehicles driving by themselves according to different regulators, because different autonomous vehicle producers who's their own regulating software. So how will, this group of vehicles behave from a traffic point of view? We do not know yet. We think we know, but we don't. We have simulations based on assumptions, but we don't have real-life sound experiments comparable to the ones that were carried out back in the 50s. So, a lot of work to do. Thank you for your attention.
Wait a minute, listen the rule. First, if it is equitable, no question, sorry, according to my timetable. Second, there is a rule. If there is more than 3 questions, we cut the dessert. If you go on, we cut the attending. So, go.
I don't know if this is...
Microphone and quick and smart question only.
So I think your call as modeler. So directly, I would like to ask you which metrics are you using for the estimates of carbon dioxide emissions? Because it's just not true that carbon dioxide emissions are decreasing in Europe. Is increasing the efficiency, is increasing the carbon, is decreasing the carbon intensity of the economy, but not the emissions. So it's just not really accurate, I would say. So second point, you were saying in the conclusions that it will take for this revolution to happen 2 to 3 decades, but actually in the modeling challenges, you're not taking into account what can be the what you call the externalities of climate change extreme events on these kind of new transportation modes, because in 2 to 3 decades in the current scenarios, we would have triggered already tipping points and points of no return of the climate system that would directly affect.
So we'll stay home. The first question is, these are officially used data, unless the ones I showed for Italy, they are numbers that we know about, they're official sources, so no produced by this research. If the official sources are wrong, then tell them. And the second point is, this is going to happen regardless of climate change. Unless unless the human society won't be the one that we know, which could be the case, in that case, there will not be revolution, but there will be a super revolution according to all other sectors of life.
Okay, second smart question.
Thank you for this wide-ranging historical perspective and also futuristic kind of reading of situation. But it seems to me that you give a very rosy view of the future. That may be because you are an optimist or because there is something in the data that convinces you that should be optimistic. Because in principle, it seems to me that all your scenarios imply a reduction of pricing for mobility. And mobility is a basic service. If you reduce the price, mobility demand will expand. And how do we face this expansion? This expansion will mean perhaps more congestion. And also we'll have other problems. We give other problems to the organization of the cities and so on. So all these improvements and technological revolutions, they may have a silver lining, but they also have a black lining, in some extent.
I totally agree with you. I am not optimistic at all. I'm just saying that what we are facing is a significant evolution. Electric vehicles are here, self-driving cars are here, and digital services are here. And this is there is no question about it. The question is how long it will take in order to have a fully fledged use of those innovations. So, I am old, I won't see it perhaps, but I'm sure that in 10, 15 years, people will buy level 3 cars at least. Okay? So it's going to improve things, but not change things. So it will be a marginal improvement, as a matter of fact. Less debt, less pollution, but for those who can afford having it. The revolutionary scenario is something that I suggest is possible. I'm not saying in my slide and in my convention that it will happen. It could happen. And if would happen, it would have a number of benefits and costs as well, who have to be computed, etc., etc. The point is that nobody is seriously taking into account the fact that this could happen. So all economic, all other analysis, transportation analysis, urban analysis, are based on the fact that our systems will be the same. In 10, 20, 40 years, we look at forecasts to 2040, 2050, which is in 25 years' time, as if nothing is going to change, which is not the case. I'm sure it's not the case. So how do we take into account the change? It's difficult. We are at the greatest uncertainty phase. So the technology is there, but it's not yet available, is not yet tested, is not yet applied. So I think that using past models is wrong because things are certain to be changing. Just to say one thing, the emission rates of cars expected in 20 years cannot be computed on the present car composition, right? I mean, it's unrealistic. But how fast the fleet of private and public-owned vehicles will adapt to new energy sources is some extra prediction we have to make. But saying zero is making a prediction which is surely wrong. So, I mean, better to guess some range rather than say zero. That's my point. Overall, the combination of a new world of 7 transportation systems is still more up in the air. But still, I mean, there is a technological possibility. Now there is a technological possibility.
Okay, I think we have to stop. Thank you very much. And one announcement before we close is that since we cannot eat in 30 minutes, I propose to meet 20 minutes after 2. And as a sacrifice, I will reduce my tongue. Natalie will reduce the tongue. So we try more or less to keep in order. So 20 minutes after 2, we start here.
Well,